Hello everyone, thanks for watching. We're going to dive back into the topic of source criticism. If you remember in our video on Muhammad and Merkabah mysticism, we touched briefly on some parallels between the Islamic text and the Testament of Solomon. We're going to go back and just refresh your memory briefly, and then we're going to dig much deeper. We're going to cover a lot of text in this video. As usual, I'm going to cite textual evidence for the claims that I'm making, and I'm not going to take the time to do that in full. I'm not going to quote or read every word, nor am I going to give you the specific citation. That would take too much time, but it will be on the screen for you, and all of the text that you see, as usual, will be in a pinned comment if you want to look at them further. So let's go back and look at one quick parallel to refresh our memory. Keep in mind that the binding of demons was a popular apocalyptic Jewish hope. We have here in the Testament of Solomon, chapter 1, there was a little boy who went and spoke to Solomon, King Solomon. I brought the demon to you, just as you commanded me. He is standing bound in front of the gates outside. Now, I contrasted this, or compared this, with a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, and this is what we came up with. In 12:10, the Prophet once offered the prayer. Satan came and tried to interrupt it, but Allah gave Muhammad the upper hand, who then choked Satan. No doubt I thought of tying him to one of the pillars of the mosque till you get up in the morning and see him. Then I remember the statement of the Prophet Solomon. So we have this common theme here of the binding of a demonic force, and of course Muhammad specifically mentions the Prophet Solomon. So let me just give you a brief overview of the plot of the Testament of Solomon. We're going to see a lot more parallels than this one instance of binding a demon. In the Testament of Solomon, Solomon's trying to rebuild the temple. He's getting some interference from some demons, just like Muhammad had some interference here when he was trying to pray. The demons that are troubling Solomon, they're interfering with his rebuilding of the temple, so he prays for help, and he gets this magical power over the demons. Solomon then uses this power to summon demons to himself. They could be bound, they could be contained in some other way because of Solomon's magic power. He then interviews these demons or interrogates them and then dispositions them accordingly. Sometimes he'll actually get some of these demons to help in the rebuilding of the temple. So that's a brief overview of the Testament of Solomon. Now, with that said, let's look at some quotes that are quite relevant. Islamic folklore developed the Solomonic tale in tremendously fertile and imaginative ways. Solomon is the greatest of world rulers, a true apostle of Allah, his messenger, and a prototype of Muhammad. Or again, Solomon is the subject of a large number of traditions and legends in Arabic literature, in which he completely overshadows in importance his father David. Solomon is spoken of as the messenger of God and is, in a way, a prototype of Muhammad. Keep that in mind, that will be very important later. Now, just for your information, the mythologization of Solomon continued well into the medieval period. In the medieval period, probably about the 12th century and probably under Arabian influence, Solomon became known especially as a writer of scientific and magical books, and we're going to see where some of those traditions stemmed from. Here's a list of 49 of these books that the scholar has cataloged, and this is by no means exhaustive. By the 15th century, books of magical secrets were attributed to many major characters of the Jewish scriptures, and especially Solomon. To this company, Muhammad could also be added. So we see from the brief review that we began this video with, as well as from these quotations, that we are on very reasonable grounds for looking for parallels between Solomonic literature and Islamic literature. Now, with that in mind, let's begin our study in the Quran and turn to Surah chapter 38. We're going to look at the control of wind. Then we subjected the wind to Solomon's power, to flow gently to his order whithersoever he willed. Kathir, of course, confirms the literal reading of this verse. Since he dispensed with them for the sake of Allah, Allah compensated him with something better, the wind, which blew gently by his order wherever he willed. Now, is there a parallel between the Quran and the Testament of Solomon? I suggest to you that there is. One of the demons that Solomon subdues and summons to himself is a wind demon. He, that is the wind demon, broke through a large contingent of soldiers, raised up a blustering cloud of dust from the earth, transported it upward, and hurled it against me many times, while I watched in amazement. When I stood up, I spat on the ground at that spot, and I sealed him. As a result, the moving air stopped. Solomon was even able to give some of his magical powers over the wind to one of the servant boys that was in his care. Then the boy obeyed the orders and went to Arabia. Now the men from the region doubted whether it was possible to bring the evil spirit under control. Nonetheless, before dawn, the house servant got up and confronted the spirit of the wind. The demon then entered the flask under the control of the boy. The boy stood firm. He bound up the mouth of the flask in the name of the Lord. The wind demon stayed inside the flask. So in Surah 38, Solomon has power over the wind, just like in the Testament of Solomon, not only the wind, but the wind demons themselves. Now let's return to Surah 38. Then we subjected the wind to his power to flow gently to his order whithersoever he willed, as also the evil ones, including every kind of builder. And then the reference here to them being bound together in fetters. Now this is what happens, as I said, over and over in the Testament of Solomon. Demons are bound or somehow contained and then brought to Solomon. But look at that word, builders, right here in Surah chapter 38. Every kind of builder. Let's make a quick stop into Tafsir Ibn Kathir, and then we'll go back into the Testament of Solomon. And also the shaitan, from every kind of builder and diver, means among them were some whom he used to build high rooms, images, basins as large as reservoirs. Keep that in mind, the building of high rooms. And cauldrons fixed in their places, and other difficult tasks which humans were unable to do. Now let's go back into the Testament of Solomon and look for some parallels. He, that is the wind demon, broke through a large contingent of soldiers. We've read this previously. Now let's continue a little further. Then I, Solomon, commanded him to pick up stones and hurl them up to the heights of the temple for the workmen. Sounds like builders, doesn't it? Or again, now when I, Solomon, heard these things, I commanded him, this time the prince of the demons, to cut blocks of Theban marble. Are you seeing the parallel here between the Quran, especially as Kathir brings it out, with the binding of these evil spirits and forcing them to perform these tasks? So let's go back to Kathir's Tafsir for a phrase I mentioned earlier. From every kind of builder and diver means among them were some whom he used to build high rooms, images, basins as large as reservoirs, and cauldrons fixed in their places, and other difficult tasks which humans were unable to do. Is there a parallel there to the Testament of Solomon? You better believe it. Now there was a gigantic cornerstone which I wished to place at the head of the Comer to complete the temple of God. All the artisans and all the demons who were helping came to the same location to bring the stone and mount it to the end of the temple, but they were not strong enough to budget. Now as Kathir indicates, Solomon gets even more powerful demons to do the task that no one else could do. When he had said these things, the Arabian wind demon went in underneath the stone, lifted it up, went up the flight of steps carrying the stone, and inserted it into the entrance of the temple. Let's go back to Surah chapter 38. What about this term divers? We see it here. Also the evil ones, including every kind of builder and diver. Now if we go to Kathir's Tafsir, we'll see that he talks about, for no better way to say it, aquatic jinn that dive down and get Solomon pearls. Are there aquatic demons in the Testament of Solomon? Of course there are. Then Solomon said to him, this is the Arabian wind demon, what can you do for me? The demon responded, I am able to move mountains, to carry houses from one place to the other, overthrow kings. And I said to him, if you have the power, lift this stone into the beginning of the corner of the temple. But he responded, I will not raise only the stone king, but with the aid of the demon who lives in the Red Sea, I will also lift up the pillar of air, etc. And so we see in the Testament of Solomon as well that there are aquatic demons who do Solomon's bidding. Now, what I haven't told you yet is the object that Solomon receives whereby he wields his magical powers. It's a ring. Let's go back to the Testament of Solomon, chapter 1. When I, Solomon, heard these things, that is referring to the demons interfering with the building of the temple, he asked God for help, and so he was praying, and then the Lord sent him, through Michael, a ring which had a seal engraved on a precious stone. Now Solomon would use this ring to exercise his magical powers over the demons. Then Solomon said to the boy, at the moment the demon appears to you, fling this ring into his chest and say to him, come, Solomon summons you. Or again, Testament of Solomon, chapter 7, when I stood up, I spat on the ground at that spot, and I sealed him, that is the demon of the wind, with the ring of God. Now let's step back outside of the Quran for a second. Are there parallels between this and other Islamic texts? Do we find talk of an engraved ring? Well, if we look for Muhammad and ring, we see that Muhammad had a ring with an inscription on it. We also see another one there, and another one there, and another one there, another engraved ring there, Muhammad's ring again, and again, and again, and again, and on it goes. So we see in narration after narration after narration after narration that Muhammad had an engraved ring. Let's go back to a quote that we read at the beginning of this video. Islamic folklore developed the Solomonic tale in tremendously fertile and imaginative ways. Solomon is the greatest of the world rulers, a prototype of Muhammad. Now, could it be that the reason for so many narrations about Muhammad and his special engraved ring, could that be something related to the quote that we just read, that the Hadith compilers saw some sort of relationship or wanted to establish some sort of relationship where Solomon was the prototype of Muhammad, and so they tried to link him implicitly with his special engraved ring? Well, now you may say, but that's not the Ring of Solomon. It never mentions the Ring of Solomon. Well, in fact, we do find Muhammad talking about the Ring of Solomon. Narrated Abu Hurairah that the Messenger of Allah said, "A beast will emerge from the earth. With it shall be the Ring of Solomon." So we see that the Ring of Solomon shows up in Islamic eschatology as well. What a coincidence. Now, before we move on, I want to make one point. The traditions that we've been reading here are esoteric. For those of you who don't have English as your first language, let me say it another way. This stuff is weird. Solomon is binding demons with the power of a magical ring. He's summoning them to himself. He interrogates them. He puts them to work, makes them build the temple. He summons an aquatic demon from the Red Sea. This is weird stuff. And the fact that it shows up in the Quran and shows up in pre-existing traditions means something. It requires an explanation. Now, having established numerous parallels in some detail between the Quran as well as other Islamic texts and the Testament of Solomon, I think it's safe to push forward and suggest the Testament of Solomon as the background for some other rather puzzling narrations. We see in the Testament of Solomon chapter 1 that the demon who was troubling the boy came as the sun was setting. When the sun is set, and I, this is speaking of the servant boy, or he's the one talking here, when I am resting, an evil spirit comes. So the demon comes at sunset. Now, of course, we know from the Hadith that this is true there as well. Satan is let loose with the sinking of the sun. Okay, fair enough. That's a fairly common belief, though, the association of darkness and demons. But what about dogs? Let's go back to the Testament of Solomon. Then I commanded another demon to appear before me. So this is Solomon talking. There came to me 36 heavenly bodies, their heads like formless dogs. They're called rulers of darkness elsewhere. Of course, Muhammad ordered that dogs be killed, and dogs were killed except for hunting dogs or those kept for livestock. Or again, Muhammad said, the black dog is a shaitan. Back to the Testament of Solomon. Then I ordered another demon to make his presence before me. He came before me in the form of a gigantic dog. So we have dog demons here in the Testament of Solomon, just like in the Hadith. He spoke to me in a loud voice, "Hail, O King Solomon." Now pay very close attention here. I was astounded and said to him, "Who are you, dog?" And he said, "You suppose that I am a dog, but before your time, king, I was a man." So we have a man being transformed into an animal. Now, do we have examples of humans being turned into animals in the Islamic literature? Of course we do. Surah Al-Baqarah, "Be apes despised and rejected," and of course Kathir and a host of other Islamic scholars affirm a literal reading of this passage. During the night, the Jews, those Jews, they're always up to something, Allah changed them from humans into monkeys. Now, could it be that the transformation of humans into animals had some basis as well in the Testament of Solomon and other traditions that stemmed from this type of writing. Let's summarize the parallels that we've seen. The binding of demons, Solomon's control of the wind in Surah 38:36, the builders and divers of Surah 38:37, the ring of Solomon, and of course Muhammad's ring, and the ring of Solomon, of course, occurs again in Islamic eschatology. Demons come out at sunset, demonic dogs, or dog demons, however you want to think about it. Of course, we also had aquatic demons in both cases as well, and then people being transformed into animals. Now, this is really fascinating stuff. Who doesn't like a good magical fairy tale every now and then? My suspicion is that if some of you are good writers, you could produce a series of books on a magical ring. And if you're good with a camera, maybe you could even produce some movies based on those books, based on that magical ring, and you might make yourself a lot of money. It makes for really good entertainment, but it makes for really bad religion. Now, there are a lot of copy-paste Muslims, and they'll do the same thing under this video that they always do. They won't defend their faith. They won't defend their book. They'll just attack Christianity because they can't do anything else. You'll see quotes or perhaps video links from the Islamic Trinity, from Rabbi Tovia Singer, from Bart Ehrman, and from George Bernard Shaw, as if anyone should care who that is. They'll do the same thing that they always do. And you can actually help me out if you're active in the comments section. It's very easy. Your comment is not relevant to this video. I'm not talking to you right now. You can go waste someone else's time. I want to talk to Muslims who have the courage to ask tough questions about the Quran and tough questions about the Hadith. Why is it that we see so many connections, so many parallels between the Quran and ancient folklore? Why do we see so many parallels between the Quran and the Hadith and these tales of mysticism and magic? I want you to ask these questions honestly and search for an answer. And when you come to that inevitable answer, well, I'll just echo J. Smith. Come on home. Jesus is waiting for you with his arms open. Come on home. Thanks for watching.